Hi, I'm Andrea.
Hey, y'all, this is Courtney, and welcome to the Human Design and Liberation Podcast.
This is a space where we explore how human design and liberation theology intersect with the past, present, and future.
With the intent of sharing the beauty and pain of the human experience to encourage you in your liberation journey.
Hello.
Hello. Oh, my goodness. We're back from vacation.
Yay.
We got to be on vacation together.
We did. It's the best.
It was awesome. It was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Ooh, so good.
We took
I can still see the
almost
color
no
on your
pictures.
skin. Yeah, we took pictures on the very last day.
We took a lot of pictures of the
because
kids, just no pictures of us,
we did.
which
Yeah,
we need to do
as
better
we
next
do.
time.
Yes, we do. We also could possibly not have kids around next time. That would probably make it easy.
That would. Yes, but also they're so cute together. I don't know if I
They
can
were
do that.
so cute together. I would not trade that time. It was amazing.
Yeah, adorable. Yes, it was. And I'm also glad to be back because we got some juicy stuff to talk about today.
We do. So much has happened. We are going to do a current events episode today. Today being June 5th.
Yeah, and I don't think we're
So,
even going to be able to cover like everything, but I think the things that are very present, yeah, they're juicy. So let's get into it.
Yes, let's do it. So speaking of mommies and motherhood, first of all, we just experienced a Venus Cazimi in Gemini, which I feel like leads us in so beautifully into this conversation around motherhood and the relationship between the institution, or not institution, I don't think that's a great word, but the reality of motherhood, the labor
motherhood and capitalist supremacy.
Definitely that relationships.
It's very different than like motherhood in a, regenerative, like community-led, beloved community environment, like night and day.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. That we have, because we are a capitalist, imperialist, white supremacist, patriarchal society. We have treated motherhood as a commodity. I think that's probably the best way of putting it. Meaning we treat mothers and children as commodities, stripping them of their humanity and not considering them on so many levels. And interestingly enough, during this Gemini season, and Venus being in Gemini, it's been really interesting over the past little bit to see articles popping up around motherhood and reproduction. We have several stories all aligned with that. And we're going to put the links to the articles in the show notes. We might not be able to get to everything, but I'm just going to list this off and then we can start where we start. But matrescence and the transformations of motherhood was an incredible article from the New Yorker, written by Anna Russell. That came out May 30th.
It's so wild because a dear friend of mine who's a Manny, she has been talking about matrescence for a while now and has been wanting to like form a group around it. And I was like, sister, nobody says that word. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, matrescence, it's like adolescence, but for moms. And I was like, I mean, I know what it's trying to say. Like, don't get me wrong, but like she was trying to like craft an offering and wanted it to be like something matrescence. And I was like, don't use that word. Like, nobody's going to know what you're talking about.
Funny.
And then, of course, she's a Manny. So she's like bringing this newness into the world. And I'm like, for sure, introduce people to the concept, like for sure, educate people, but like don't lead with that term because nobody's going to know what you're talking about.
And be like, huh?
And sure enough, like a couple weeks later, this article comes out. So I just find that timing to be, I mean, she's been thinking about this for months. Like this is,
Yeah. This feels
um,
so, this is some serious manifestor energy. And
yeah,
it's also very Gemini because in Gemini, um, especially Mercury also being in Gemini, we have like 8 planets in Gemini right now, which I think
we
we only have
do.
eight
And I'm a
planets.
Gemini
So
rising, which is like
if you're a Gemini
so
rising,
fun and wild for me. But yes, I'm here for it. I'm here for the energy.
yes, a lot of energy. And one of those things is around communication. It's so funny that you said that about matrescence because I was listening to the astrology podcast with Chris Brennan, and I can't remember the other host, but one of the things they said about Mercury and Gemini was around um, finding the right words to describe whatever subject you're trying to talk about. And very, very
Yeah.
much that, like, it's not about just any words, it's the right words. And so to have a word like matrescence kind of re-enter the collective in this way,
Mm,
first of all, it's very manny to clock that,
right?
especially simple. So,
Gemini
wow, on
rising.
you.
Katya, if you're
Good
listening,
job.
shout out.
Yeah, shout out to you. But also, um, what it encompasses, if now we can define it. Matrescence, like you said, is
Right.
very much like adolescence. It's the way that child bearing impacts the human body of the carrier, of the
Hmm.
birthing person. And
Hmm.
so it's about maternalism, not necessarily, again, binaries. We don't, fuck with
Right.
binaries. So anybody can birth a baby, but it's about the change in your body that happens before and after, and how
Mhm.
um, it's something that is not studied and has not been studied closely until very, very recently. This article says that changes in the brain for a birthing person has not been studied until the like 2010s. So we're talking about only
Well,
10 years ago that they really started, like scientists started studying this, maybe
yeah.
others, but
I mean,
scientists in particular.
well, and also I think like we have to take that with a grain of salt because what that says is that quote unquote, and I'm using heavy quote, modern medicine, right?
Exactly.
Whatever that means. Um,
Exactly.
because this would a lot of what they started studying in the last 15 years was knowledge that our ancestors had from
That part.
witnessing the transformation that we underwent. And so when you look at like the practices in parts of the world where indigenous practices are still impeccably held, like
Mhm.
there's an author who wrote, oh gosh, am I going to remember the title? It's a book about postpartum depletion. And it's basically curing it. The title is like curing postpartum depletion. And he, credit to him, white man in Australia, went to, I think, Nepal and parts of sub Saharan Africa and like different regions of the world where indigenous practices were still in place to
Yes.
understand how women were taken care of post birth. And like this is
Mm.
this is the moment we're talking about. Like obviously pregnancy, the changes already start, but post birth
Right.
is when the depletion starts. And
Right.
um I just think that if we were to go to those societies and have a conversation about matrescence, like they'd be able to read you the book without
Mm.
having read any of the studies, right?
Right.
Because this is knowledge that we have about the human experience, but we have willfully been
That part.
uh, expunged, is the best way to describe it, right? Like it was,
Yes.
especially in Europe during, you know, the Middle Ages and even a little bit before, definitely in Rome during its heyday, like anything that had to do with the female experience or
Mm.
the, being born with a uterus experience was considered dirty, was considered
Wow.
a
Yes.
weakness, was considered unholy, like all of
Mm-hmm.
these things
Mm-hmm.
that are obviously not true. And all you have to do is like rewind a couple hundred years before that and see
Yeah.
like how maternal the maternal experience was central to the spiritual experience in these
Yes.
places, right? Like
Yes.
in the continent of Africa, right? Because you have so many different religious expressions, but from Egypt all the way down to South Africa. When
Yes.
you look at like Gaul and the British Isles, like the
Mm-hmm.
Celt experience, like it was revered.
Mm.
Even in Judaism for many, many hundreds of years prior to the Romans, there was the Shekinah, which is like the female goddess, and there
Oh, wow.
was a whole lineage of like female teachers and right. And so um
Right.
yeah, it's been expunged intentionally.
I really appreciate you saying that because one of the things that really kicked this up for me again is something that I was really thinking about during the throes of the of quarantine and the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
particularly around care work.
Mm-hmm.
But also what kicked it up for me again was our last episode we recorded when you mentioned about matricide and the genocide of women that happened before the Great Plagues,
Yeah.
and how there was something that we said around like the about women and weakness, and what
Mm-hmm.
we realized was like it's not so much that women are weaker or we're weaker or like in our bodies. It's just that our bodies at the time were for something else
Yes.
entirely. Like we
Yeah.
were seen as beings who brought life.
Yeah.
And instead of that being what we now kind of treat as either an illness or a commodity, both of which are
Right.
commodities, kind of the two sides of the same
It's
coin.
objectification.
Um,
Yeah.
right now, like what I feel like these articles are doing is in a way kind of returning to this place of reverence,
Yeah.
um, of of like a greater societal impact and um
Really
it's that
respect, right?
multiplicity. Yeah, a
Yeah.
respect that it's more than just like another type of assembly line.
Right.
The act of
Right.
bringing life in its own, you know, autonomy as a as an act of inhumanity is incredibly multifaceted, important, deeply spiritual, deeply physical, as we'll
Mhm.
connect to another article that we're going to reference, and should be done with a sense of agency and autonomy by the person giving birth because this is such a deeply spiritual act,
It also just
and
has such
multi-layered act.
a massive impact on your life experience, right? Like you go through
Yeah.
so many physical changes, it alters
Yes.
what you can do in your life. And so that needs to be a conscious choice. It has to be a conscious
Yeah.
choice. Yeah, which
Absolutely.
brings me to like the um ruling that just came down in North Carolina around
Yes.
the abortion bill. So tell us about that.
Yes. So in North Carolina, an incredible judge, an Obama appointee. Thank you, God, that they still exist. This incredible judge actually basically gutted a major portion of an anti-abortion bill that was passed through our supermajority GOP legislature. I believe it was last year. Thank you to the people who challenged that bill
Yeah.
all the way up, fighting for birthing people. But this judge ruled that it was unconstitutional to make it so that only the general practitioner of a person seeking the bill is the only one who can prescribe it. So
Mm,
now, just like most other drugs, there are some controlled substances, but most other prescription drugs can be prescribed by anyone who can prescribe drugs. So a pharmacist, um, any other doctor that you may interact with, But in
Even
North
like, I think
Carolina,
physicians assistants can prescribe drugs too, right?
yes,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So, which also talks about the economic ramifications of what that bill was. But in North Carolina, before this, it was such that only a GP could not only prescribe the drug, but administer it. So a birthing
Mm,
person had to go into their GP every time they needed to take a pill or any time, I
right.
don't know exactly how that works because I've never experienced this firsthand, but it had to be done in the presence of a GP. And then they had to be a follow-up appointment afterwards with the
Mm,
GP.
okay.
Which again, if when we live in a society where there's no free healthcare for everyone.
Right.
And it's just
The
compounding
economic
costs.
barrier.
The economic barriers are massive. The labor barriers of people not being able to get leave, all of these things that become a
Yeah.
barrier to someone being able to choose such a massive impact. I almost liken it to the way you described me before. Forced pregnancy feels very much like the military draft
Yeah.
in a sense that like it's someone saying this is what you're going to do with your body now, and what you're going to do with your body is put it in a situation where it's in service to empire.
I
So
was going to
there's
say,
one.
I mean, it very much is aligned with it. I just finished The Women, which, oh my God, so good. So good.
Oh,
So good. It's so good. It's a book by Kristen Hanna, about the Vietnam
ooh,
War. Hard,
oh
but
wow.
so good. And one of the things that we don't talk about enough is the violence of our system and these rules, and
Yes,
um the violence on women's bodies of forced pregnancy is indisputable. And the
indisputable.
risk of death, and especially for Black and
Yes,
brown women, it's 4 times the risk
yeah,
of death for white women, which is still high. Like, maternal
yeah,
mortality is still high.
yes,
And
unreasonably
so,
high in a place like the United States.
yeah, it's the highest of all of the other developed countries combined.
Wow.
Literally, it's higher than the rates of all the other countries combined. And so, likening that, I mean, obviously the death rates in war are higher.
Of
But
course.
it's the same risk. It's the same,
Right.
it's it's putting your life on the line
Yeah.
to, but when you look at the motivation behind these bills, it's very much to limit women, limit their abilities,
Yes.
limit what they're available for. When Roe versus Wade
Yes.
passed, the number of women in the workforce soared,
Yes.
because of that physical demand that having children has on your body, and being able to choose when you're going to show up for that demand, if
Yep.
you're going to show up for it, right? And
Yep.
then when you look at like the motivation behind bringing these abortion bans front and center, it's all
Mhm.
centered around labor and having
Yeah.
free labor, cheap labor, right? Like,
Yeah.
young people are objectified and considered free, cheap labor. And so that
Absolutely.
was a big economic driver in the development of our country. And
Yeah.
especially if you were poor, then the more kids you had, the more bodies you had to till the earth and
That's
plant
so
seeds.
true.
And it's this whole thing with the Republican Party and, like, you know, birthing babies, like, their wives and daughters are having abortions. Okay. They're voting
Listen.
against abortion while they're having abortion. Okay. So
Yes.
then the question is, why are they trying to ban abortions for the general public? And it's because they want the labor of those children.
Absolutely. Especially when it's happening coinciding with the weakening of child labor laws.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's sick. Honestly, it's sick.
Yes.
And
And also
anyone
single
who thinks
mothers. Yeah.
anyone who thinks that it's a moral calling is just deluded. Okay.
Absolutely.
It's not. Their morality
Yeah.
has been out the window since the moment they started fundraising for whatever position they're in. Okay.
Exactly. So please tell it. Yes, absolutely. And I think another point in all of this is that, again, just because a law is a certain way doesn't really have any ramifications on one's morality. I think that
No.
in and of itself is a farce for someone to get on their soapbox and claim, well, I'm a fill in the blank because it's not just Christians, even though in this country it overwhelmingly is evangelical
Yeah.
Christians, but I'm a
Yeah.
fill in the blank religion and I believe that abortion is wrong. Okay, you can still believe that. You
Then
don't
don't have
have
an
to
abortion.
participate.
Then
You can
don't
even
have an
teach your
abortion.
family, your children, the people giving birth in your family, not to do something, but to then
Sure.
claim that a government, an outer authority, has to step in and force us all to conform
Right.
to this singular idea that you have or this
Yeah.
singular, commitment that you've made as an individual
Yeah.
is, a little
And for
unhinged.
them to then decide, like whose health is worth saving and whose health is not worth saving. And nope, that's a very slippery slope that none of us should be on, nor do we want to be on.
Right. Absolutely. And I also wanted to mention, and we don't have to go into it, but there was another article that we read about the energy expenditure of being a person carrying a child. And it was found that um, it takes approximately 50,000 dietary calories, the caloric demand on the body, and that 96% of that energy expended comes from the woman's body or the birthing person's body, while 4% comes from the developing baby's tissue.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting about this to me is one that anybody, there's just a world that we lived in where we thought that it was like NBD to carry a baby.
Yeah. Right.
Anyone who's actually done that, um, you've experienced someone, especially a doctor, especially a male doctor, or someone even administering, because when I sat in the WIC office, it was the same type of conversation. Oh, you
Yeah.
weigh too much. You need to be out working out, trying to get this baby weight off or trying to exercise while you have the baby, as if my
Right.
body was not expending enough
It wasn't
energy.
working hard enough. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You can't see my face, and you got to watch the YouTube to see my face because it's just like cracked thinking about the
Yeah.
things that people told me while I was pregnant. Um, but that this, again, it's funny because these are ancestral knowings, right? Like
Yeah.
I come
Yeah.
from people who, when a person is carrying a baby, you are feeding that person
Yep.
nonstop.
Yep.
That person isn't expected to do anything besides,
Make the baby.
watch their bellies expand,
Yeah. Make the baby. Literally.
right? Just make
Yeah.
baby.
I had a physician's assistant tell me when I was like maybe 5 weeks, 6 weeks pregnant with Everett that she only wanted to see me gain 12 pounds in that pregnancy. And I was like, excuse me? And
Blink,
I just
blink,
looked at
blink,
her and I
blink,
was
blink.
like, I don't think that's any of your business.
Listen.
And she was like, well, just for your health. And I was like, I'll take care of my health. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank
And
you very
needless to
much.
say, I mean, I already knew we were moving and they weren't going to be my provider. So I had probably more courage than I might have had if I thought that was going to have to be my provider. But I mean, the type of craziness that we are subjected to. And this was a young, she was, who knows if she had kids or not, but it's just like this um, hubris that you might know what is healthy or not healthy based on anti-Black principles that you've been indoctrinated in for your entire career. Like, I'm sorry.
Listen.
Not gonna fly.
Not
Not
gonna
gonna fly.
fly. It's truly wild. And so the fact that this is all coming out, this is all being exposed during this time, I think is a really big deal. And that it's happening in conjunction with the court cases, the way the government has been
Yeah.
moving and so
Yeah.
forth. It really is a very dynamic time when we're talking about um one of the basic, building blocks of human relationship, which is sex and reproduction.
Yeah.
Um and parenthood,
Yes.
So all of those things I think is really, really incredible to look at right now.
Yeah. And I think we're gonna have to do a part two for the other topics that we were wanting to do. So maybe we can have that for next week. Because they're still very relevant and alive.
They are relevant. Yes. I love a part
Very
two.
alive.
I love a series.
I know. Me too. Um, but one of the things that I see with my clients, we were chatting before this, and I was sharing with you the large percentage of my clients that are mothers. It's definitely at least 75%. And when we look at the ways the not self is showing up and the deconditioning that is required, there is there is like depth of conditioning that comes with having a uterus that we don't necessarily acknowledge enough. And maybe it's because Ra didn't have a uterus, and so he couldn't really speak
You
to that
know?
experience. He was very reverent and he was very vocal about
Yes, he was.
the harm done based on, your intersections, whether it's
Yes.
um, your, sexual identity or your gender or
Mhm.
whatever. Um,
Yeah. Location
but
in
at
the
the same
world, all
time,
of that.
yeah, he didn't have a lot of the language that we have now, obviously, because we haven't had it that
Right.
long. Um, but what has been, I think, most liberating for my clients who have had children is just how many answers are in their bodies. And
Mm.
as they start to disrupt these ideas that have been propagated through the medical system and all the tentacles that this society has,
Yeah.
um, honoring that knowing and taking whatever that step is, whether it's finding a provider that's not fat phobic or
Mhm.
finding a provider that doesn't use BMI or
Mhm.
just really like listening to your authority and the wisdom in your body. And as you start to make decisions based on that, feeling so much more empowered and lovable because you're
Mhm.
loving yourself, right? Like these are the subtle shifts I think that um human design can offer and just being in this awareness. And then we have like the reflection back to us of the scientific studies and all the things that,
Yeah.
follow. But all of those things are just a reflection of the work that we are doing internally to see that and remember that in ourselves. And then, of course, all of a sudden it's hugely apparent in the science, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And I think as science becomes like everything else becomes more and more and more um diverse,
Hmm.
and we're experiencing the uniqueness of all these different types of people and their intersections with the work. We
Hmm.
It's more is revealed to us. And I do want to give a very quick special shout out to I think Vanessa Henry, who's an incredible
Yeah.
human design practitioner, and her work regarding cognition, because that's what kind of lit up for me is cognition. We won't go into detail about what that is, even though we'll link her work about it because she's
Yeah.
excellent.
She's
But
amazing.
cognition essentially is like how we um, understand uh, our environment through our
Well,
bodies in
it's
some
how,
ways,
yeah,
right?
it's how we digest. It's how we digest our
Digest,
environment
yes.
and information and food. And yes, it's very much. like how the body takes in and assimilates and orients to the food, the information, the everything that you take in. Yeah.
Right. Right. And we have that. We all have that. And I think the experience of childbirth and it's one of those things that can heighten that so much. And when we are inside of a system that tries to condition us out of trust in that, you can feel very, very gaslit. And so to find human design, I'm sure your clients are just like, thank you for showing me that my body knew what it was talking about.
Yeah, it's very confirming. Yeah. And yeah, Lord knows we need the affirmation.
Oh my gosh.
We need our experience affirmed, for sure.
There's one takeaway from this whole episode. It is you need your experiences affirmed. Absolutely. Especially if you're a child carrying person, if you're a parent. So
or in relationship with one. Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah. Stay tuned for part 2. We have some more juicy topics for part 2, including the Atlanta water crisis, which we are currently still in. But we'll talk about that then.
Yes. And some 6-line fun conversations about Kendrick Lamar and Macklemore. If any rap fans are out there, which we are both major hip hop fans. Watching these two men express their 6 lines recently has been a treat.
Yes.
For me personally.
We'll go into it for me too. Very much for me. Yeah, that'll be good. And in the meantime, just thank you for being here to everybody listening. And thank you, Courtney, for being here. And
thank you, Andrea.
Just excited about these explorations. We have some fun announcements coming. So if you're not in the Patreon, you do not have to pay to be in the Patreon, but paid members are getting additional benefits like show notes and summaries and discussion. They're able to ask us questions and influence what we talk about on the show. So lots of fun perks for paid members. But even if that's not available or you're not interested in being a paid member, just connect with us there because we have some fun things coming. We have a really exciting exploration of freedom that we're going to be doing between June 19th, Juneteenth, and July 4th. That I can't wait to explore with all of you. And we just have so much
GOOD. All caps.
All caps. It's gonna be so good. So the Patreon is gonna find out about that first, and info will be coming out about that shortly. So yay.
Excited.
Early next week. So that's exciting.
Yeah. All right, boo. And all the boos out there.
All the boos. We love you.
We love you. Have a great week.
Yes. And we'll be in your ears again soon.
Thank you so much for tuning into HD and Liberation Podcast. We hope you've gained valuable insights into human design and its role in building a life of peace, success, satisfaction, and wonder. If you've enjoyed this episode, please show your support by liking, following, and sharing our podcast on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. Your engagement helps us reach more people who can benefit from this wisdom. For exclusive content and to join our thriving community, consider becoming a Patreon member. Your support allows us to continue exploring the depths of human design and its potential for life and community transformation. Stay tuned for more fun, thoughtful, and impacting discussions. Together, we're unlocking the path to a more liberated and authentic life. Thank you for being part of HD and Liberation Podcast.